everyone and welcome to another video. I am Simply G and today I'm going to be showing off all of the anime that I got for this month of June. There's a lot here, more than I expected, and I think part of it is because a lot of the orders that I had made that had gotten held up in shipping finally arrived. So I have like 3 months worth of purchases here. Comparatively to, I mean, I still had plenty to show off in previous months, but this just kind of all came at once. A lot of them are local releases, all of them are Region B releases, so a little bit different from the norm, because obviously international shipping, and especially shipping from the US, is very slow. I've kind of been avoiding it for a while since the global pandemic. I've been trying to not buy as much overseas, which hasn't been that successful, but regardless, it does mean that a lot of these are local releases or just UK releases as well, versus the more typical stuff that I buy, which is the US release of stuff. Anyway, I don't want to spend too long on this intro, so I'll just get straight into it, and I hope you guys enjoy. So first off, we have some merchandise. These are for things that I've shown off kind of before as well. So I received the most recent release, I guess, for the last year's birthday merchandise for free. The swimming anime series. So if you're not aware, Kyoto Animation puts out merchandise for each of the characters from the free franchise for their birthday. They've done this ever since the first season, and I, like a chump, have been buying it ever since the first season. Last year I was buying both the clear file and the rubber strap of these characters. But this coming year, I've only been buying the clear file because they change what type of merchandise they have every year. But I always get the clear file because that's kind of my favorite type of merchandise, especially when we're talking about artwork. I don't know. Anyway, so I received the last of last year's characters, which is Kisumi Shigino. So you can see his birthday is May 26th. So this is the clear file. And this was, yeah, Link Up Smile. So that was the theme. Kind of obviously a smiling style, but also with these drinks. That was kind of the theme of this year, or last year. And I also got the rubber strap, as you can see. So obviously done in the chibi style. And this is pretty typical for the clear files. And for all of this merchandise, you have artwork in the style of the show, and then a more chibified version. Also, though, I had been complaining because normally I pre-order these from Kyoto Animation store itself, and that means I don't miss out. But there's been a couple times where I've missed pre-order periods, or I just forgot about it, or whatever else. And normally I can buy the merchandise in secondhand sites and stuff fairly easily. It's not too hard to track down, but last year, or this year I should say, because it was January, I could not find the rubber strap for one of the characters, and I was looking for it everywhere, and then it wasn't until either February or March where KyoAni actually put the merchandise on their web store, all of their leftovers, and I was really happy they did, because I was kind of freaking out because this character is not one of the main characters. He's not even a really important or popular character, although I do love him. But I finally managed to get the rubber strap for Nitori Eiichiro, who is one of the characters from Samazuka. He's been in the show since the first season, but he's definitely like not a main character. He's one of the major supporting characters. And so, yeah, I finally got his rubber strap. I've had his clear file for a while. But yeah, so his birthday is in January. I don't remember exactly when it is, but it's been quite a few months, but I can finally say that I completed my collection. You guys who've watched my videos for a long time know I'm a huge Free fangirl, and you know, I'm a sucker for the merchandise, especially the birthday merchandise. So yeah, I don't see my spending on this sort of stupid stuff stopping anytime soon, especially not in the next year, because they've already started putting out the merch for this year's birthday stuff. So I've already pre-ordered the 4 that have been released or have been put up for pre-order. I'm a hopeless cause. You guys know this. So yeah, anyway. And speaking of being a hopeless cause, the next thing is a new release from the UK. It's something I didn't need. It's something I already own. It's something that is just completely unnecessary. But when I saw it go up for pre-order, and for a pre-order special, I was like, all right, I'm gonna get this, because, and there's a couple reasons why. So what I'm talking about is the most recent release from Anime Limited for Full Metal Alchemist, the original series. This is the 2003-2004 series, a series that I have owned so many times before, and I still own in various iterations. So this is one of my very first anime. You guys, again, if you've stuck on the channel for a while, you know that Full Metal Alchemist is one of my favorite franchises of all time. It was also one of the very first shows that I ever watched in regards to anime. So yeah, I kind of imprinted hard on it as a fan, and my adoration for it, it just continues to exist. And it's, in my opinion, I still love it. I still go back to it all the time. But this particular show, I originally watched illegally through streaming sites before streaming was like a thing, especially here in Australia. But pretty immediately I bought the Australian DVD release for the entire series, which were like really fat pack, silvery, like really shiny silver cases or cover art, which were fine. I've since gotten rid of those. Because I immediately followed it up by buying the thin pack releases from Funimation, the DVD sets, which I still own, in fact, which are basically just the singles in the really thin 7mm cases. So there's 2 sets of those for the 2 halves of the show. And then that was what I had for a long time, and then I followed that up with the US standard Blu-ray release, because if you're not aware, when Aniplex was going to take back the license for Fullmetal Alchemist, Funimation decided to put out a collector's, like, super amazing limited edition of the show on Blu-ray for the first time. They also released standard sets. I decided to not get the limited edition just because I wasn't really buying a lot of limited editions at the time, and also I wasn't a huge fan of the packaging or any of that. I don't know, it was a different time. But I did buy the standard for the series as well as the film, although I think I already at that point owned the film via Blu-ray from the Australian release. I don't know, I have a complicated history with these releases. But then I followed up so I bought that, I had that for a little while, but then the UK released their ultimate edition of this show, which is really fancy. I still own it. It came in 2 digipacks, and it had this huge resin gate and all these wonderful little extras, huge art book. And I still own that. I still love it. It's something very special to me and to the collection. But I didn't, regardless of like the actual presentation, I wasn't really super happy about the 2 halves. Just because I like to have a whole show in one case, like one box, which isn't to say that the older release is bad or anything, but I was kind of hanging out for an edition like this from Anime Limited. So what they've done now is this is one of their more standard collector's editions. It comes with a slip case as such, which has all of the information and everything else. This is only the TV show as well, just by the way. The film is still a separate product or purchase because it's owned by a different company or released by a different company in the UK, so that's that. But this has a pretty standard box, and this is artwork that was used on one of, I think, the quarter releases, the 25 episode release or 12 episode release sets from the US. There's been a lot of different versions of Full Alchemist, but this also has obviously the two halves of the show in keep cases, normal disc cases, and then a small art book, which is just like additional. It's pretty much everything that's in here is also in the larger art book that came with the Ultimate Edition. So I didn't buy it for the art book or anything, but it's a nice little extra. And I just kind of appreciate, also weirdly, these are in like this kind of case. I don't know if I'm gonna switch it out because I'm not a huge fan of these sort of overlapping disc. I'm especially for 3-disc releases, I'm way more used to like having the flipper part in the middle. I don't know. That's just me being a bit facetious and a little bit I guess anal about packaging. Anyway, it doesn't really matter, but I don't know whether I'm going to have it like this or have it with this slip cover. I don't know. I'm still undecided, but I actually really like this release. I think it's nice. It doesn't take up a huge amount of space, especially comparatively to the older releases of this set, and even compared to the earlier Ultimate Edition or the earlier like collector's limited editions, because the UK did release the show without the like big fancy gate and all of those extra things. This is thinner and like takes up less space than those. So yeah, it was a completely unnecessary purchase by all accounts, because I literally own this show in now 3 different ways. 2 of them being the same way, which is the UK Blu-ray release, but I do still have those US DVD releases. Yeah, completely unnecessary purchase, but for the actual collection, and I think re-watching and like taking discs out and all of that, this is the option I prefer. And I mean, I've spent more on shows that I don't like it as much, if that makes sense. Not too often, but I have in the past, and so for Full Alchemist, I'm just kind of hypocritical. It's something I really, really love, so I don't mind putting aside the money to buy it when I want to. Anyway, yeah, very odd little release, and kind of me trying to justify this purchase to myself, but I'm very happy with it. Next are some more UK releases. These are also put out by Anime Limited or All the Anime, whichever you prefer, which is one of the major anime licensing companies in the UK. I own a lot of their releases because I really like their style of release. Generally, it comes with a chipboard, like outer box, digipack, and then some sort of extra, usually a booklet. Personally, I don't really mind or care about the digipack aspect of it, but I do appreciate that it gives them more artwork to you. It's just a nicer overall product, especially compared to some of the standard editions that some of the shows that they release gets in the US. So I still own Ping Pong, that was put out by them, which is a much nicer release than the US one. Wolf's Rain as well is a beautiful release comparatively to the US release. The Silver Spoon they put out on Blu-ray. Even Bacchanal, I prefer the UK release comparatively to the US like fancy Aniplex release. So, you know, it's my personal preference, but they haven't really ever let me down when it comes to a series release, especially for their actual titles that they put out comparatively to their Funimation partnership, which is no longer a thing, but was more so just like the show in a case. Anyway, this is for a show that has, I think, technically been licensed in the US because Aniplex has it, but it will never be released because it was a terrible seller. It was a terrible streamer. A lot of people didn't like the show or just never finished it, and I can 100% understand why. It also basically killed the studio, which was Manglobe, no longer exists. This was kind of the final nail in the coffin. This and Gangsta. In saying that, I personally hadn't finished the show for, I started watching it when it first came out, which was, like 2013, 2014, and got to a point which was, I think, where a lot of people kind of fell off of it, at like episode 6 or 7, because it kind of takes a very hard left turn, which at the time I was like, I don't know if I like this, and I wasn't going to watch it. But now, since I have been at home with nothing to do, I've been catching up and finishing a lot of shows that I started or didn't know that if I would like. I've just been giving things a second chance, or at least a chance to complete them. And this was one of those shows, and I actually ended up really enjoying it. This has a kind of dedicated cult following amongst its fans, but this is the complete series of Samurai Flamenco parts 1 and 2 on Blu-ray, subtitled only. So you can see we have these really nice releases, and this, even in the, like, this is the only Blu-ray release of the series in the English-speaking world. Australia did get DVD releases, but this was, even now, it's not a good seller. It didn't sell well for Anime Limited. And I got the second part new because it was like £10 on Zavi, I think. And then the first part I actually got for £5 plus shipping from CEX UK. I used a proxy to get that because it is, as I said, technically I think this part is out of print, but it's such a non-popular show that you can get it for really cheaply. And I believe that this first part was included in a lot of like mystery box type of deals, so there's a lot of extra copies floating around. So if you are a fan, or if you are someone who wants kind of a Blu-ray release of everything, then you might want to look into that. Anyway, so this this is such a, and it's not something that I necessarily understood when I first watched the show. And even when it finished and I heard people who were still talking about it back in the day, like 2014, this was a point that people made. And it's something that I've only gotten more familiar with, a genre I've only gotten more familiar with recently. So this is a love letter to tokusatsu shows, Super Sentai type of series, which are hugely popular in Japan, not so much outside of Japan. Of course, we have the popularity of like Power Rangers, and now we're seeing more and more things like Ultraman and that getting released and having a kind of a wider range in the Western market. But it, comparatively to Japan, it is not like a viable market really at all. Like, people don't watch, you know, these masked hero type of stories. Even kids, like, I don't know if Power Rangers is still being shown. Probably, I don't know, I'm not up to date, but it's not, comparatively to the popularity in Japan, outside of Japan, it is nothing. It is really incomparable. But what this series is, it's about a young guy. He's a actor, model, kind of dude, who grew up with watching all of these tokusatsu and being inspired to become a hero. So when he becomes independent, when he finally hits adulthood at 20, he decides that he wants to become this, the hero that he always wanted to be. So he becomes this masked vigilante samurai flamenco, and he sort of the show starts off with him fighting crime and just little things. He's kind of like a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He doesn't have powers or anything. He does have beefed up sort of weapons, which aren't really weapons. There's a whole thing about it, but he doesn't have any kind of crazy superpowers. He's just a guy going out there trying to help society or help the neighborhood. He quickly kind of befriends this police officer who works in the area that he is in, who runs into him a couple of times and is like, dude, what are you doing? Why are you so into this? And as I said, they quickly become friends. There's also a kind of rival girl group who also are becoming vigilante heroes because of being inspired by his things. But then very quickly the show changes to be more in line with the tropes of these tokusatsu shows. So ultimately our main character kind of goes viral for all of his various good deeds, which means that he's getting more and more villains to defeat, and these villains are becoming more and more inhuman. And the reason it's a love letter is that all of these things that are become crazy, ridiculous, really stupid, not even within the realm of, reality, comparatively to the first beginning part where it is very much grounded in reality and the everyday, is 100% evocative in this homage to things like, Ultraman and Power Rangers and Kamen Rider and stuff like that, where, there's a crazy, wacky monster of the week that gets defeated, but every week, because the villains have to get stronger and tougher so that your hero doesn't, get complacent, and that's what happens in the show, and it's poking fun at that. It's very self-aware, but I think because, again, it's not a hugely popular thing, Sentai shows, it's just not something that necessarily translates that well for Western audiences. I would also say that even in Japan, this wasn't a good seller, so it's something that's also very hard to bring to anime. And I think the fan bases of each are very different as well. But I will say that I do think there's a lot to enjoy about this series. It gets quite dark in weird ways, but it's fun, it's ridiculous, the characters are really likable. And if you are a fan of tokusatsu shows, then maybe give it a try. It is very self-aware, and it's just all around pretty enjoyable. I ended up liking it a lot, and because when I first watched it, I did like it a lot, aside from kind of that episode 7 turning point where it does go into the more ridiculous, but going into it now, knowing that ridiculousness is that's very purposeful and it is meant to be evocative of these sorts of shows, I was more willing to just roll with it, and it was still a great time. It's not a beautiful looking show. This was one of Manglobe's later works. They were not, they didn't have a huge amount of money to put towards their characters looking like how they should look all of the time, but it's not something that for me took me out of the show when I was watching it. I know some people are more aware of that type of stuff, but I didn't really even notice. But again, it's a very interesting little series. It's one that's very unique within this medium, mainly because, again, as I said, there's not a huge call for this sort of show. But it's fun, and it's a good time, and I've said this before, but I really appreciate Manglobe for everything that they try to do. They were really, when they were still a company, when they were still making anime, they really had some really interesting, weird, unique titles that would never have been popular. And that's unfortunate, because obviously you need your properties to be making money to exist and to continue making stuff. But they really pushed the envelope. They weren't afraid to get weird and to get experimental and to make stuff that maybe only 3 people will enjoy. And now really the only other, like, since Manglobe has kind of died, really the only comparable studio I can think of is Mappa, which have a pretty even balance of like hugely popular stuff and then this more niche. We are making this for a very specific audience, and if nobody likes it, then oh well. And I appreciate that a lot. And yeah, I miss Manglobe. I miss Manglobe a lot, and it's sad that this was kind of ultimately something that put them at death's door, but it's a fun show, and I probably won't rewatch it immediately, but I'm glad to have it. And I'm really appreciative to Anime Limited for actually putting this out on Blu-ray, knowing that probably nobody would buy it. It was definitely a passion project sort of title for them, which tends to be what they do. They have a mix of, they have some hugely popular titles, but then a majority of their stuff is stuff that are very niche, kind of hidden gem. They have dedicated fan bases, but don't have the numbers or the popularity comparatively to more general stuff. Anyway, yeah, Samurai Flamenco Part 1 and 2, the whole 25 episode series. It's a good time. It's on Crunchyroll as well if you're wanting to watch it. And the Australia has a DVD release. US never got any sort of release, so you might want to think about importing it if you are a fan of the series. Lastly, for UK releases, I actually only got this today, so it's sort of still in packaging that I'm probably going to change. Anyway, you don't care about that, but this is Fate Stay Night, Unlimited Blade Works Volume 2. This is the standard release for this show. I own the first half standard release by Hanabi, which is the Australian release of it, which is in a much thinner case. It's still a 4-disc release, but we don't use these fat packs for 4 discs. But the Part 2 never got a standard release in Australia, mainly because Hanabi kind of decided not to do anime anymore when that sort of thing was happening, and also, I don't know, just Aniplex being a weirdo. So, obviously, this is the second half of the Unlimited Blade Works anime TV show. I've said before, I'm not a huge, I'm not really into the Nasu-verse, overlapping style of stuff. I do own the Fate franchise, or the Ufotable Fate franchise, and I do own Garden of Sinners, but I've never seen things like Fate Apocrypha or Fate Grand Order, or, you know, all of these other bits and bobs, although I will probably watch the Lord El Milloy. I don't remember what his name is. The Waver spin-off, the older Waver spin-off, which is not Ufotable, but I do like that character, so I will probably watch that one. It's kind of like Clamp. There's just too much of it. I don't have time to try and deal with it. But I do like Fate for what it is. I'm not a huge fan of the Dean adaptation, mainly because I didn't find Saber a very interesting character. anyway, you don't it's just it's something that I can appreciate, and I like it for some of the ideas. I think that there's some really and I mean, if you've seen this show or in the movies and all of that, it's a beautiful looking show. It's a great action set piece. I'm not gonna say that it's like the best series ever, and I personally don't think that just because it looks good it means it's necessarily a good series, but I do think there's a lot to like about it. I like a lot of the characters in Unlimited Blade Works. I think Rin's very interesting. I think Saber is much better in these versions versus the old Dean stuff. You know, there's stuff for me to attach myself to in Fate Stay Night. So I like it. It's not brilliant, but I've been meaning to get this second half for a long time. As I said, we just never got a standard release of the second half here in Australia, which is weird, but alright. And so now I've got that, and I hope to finish my collection. But yeah, I'm gonna have to do something about this, because I do not like these, because also look, it's just so wasteful. Look at this. I hate it. I hate it. There's so many easier ways to package these sorts of, and it doesn't close easily. It's just ugh, I hate it. And speaking of the Fate Stay Night franchise, I bought this because I wanted to buy something else and I needed something for free shipping. And I liked this, but it wasn't like, I need to rewatch it and with the subsequent parts because I don't remember anything from it. But this is Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel, the first film, which is Presage Flower. This is the Sakura route, or for the Fate Stay Night. So if you don't know like anything about the Fate franchise, it's based off of a visual novel called Fate Stay Night. The original 2006 version that Dean did follows for the most part, it follows the Saber route, because it's a visual novel, but it's also kind of a dating sim style of stuff. But it follows the Saber route. The Unlimited Blade Works follows the Rin route, and then this version follows the Sakura route, which is ultimately the darkest and like most fucked up route out of all of them. I've only seen the first two films. That's all that's been released. It is going to be a trilogy. Yeah, personally, Sakura isn't my favorite character, and my sister kind of hated me for the fact that we went to go see the second film. She'd seen the first one, but didn't remember anything about it. And I think this series is hurt a lot by being a visual novel, because there's a lot of info dumps all of the time. I don't remember in this film, but the second film certainly. There's also a really awkward sex scene in the second one. We were both watching like, this is not like, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this. It's very uncomfortable. And that's not being prudish. That's just like, it's not a good time if your main female character is like crying and like, oh, it's just, yeah, anyway. But this is the first film. As I said, I don't remember anything about it. I'm sure it's set up to the larger film and the larger route. You can see there's Hercules on there, or Berserker. Spoilers for a older, well, I mean the visual novel is older. The film isn't that old. Saber obviously is in there because it follows the same characters. You know, we still have Rin and Emiya and Ilya and all of these people, but it's just becoming more aware of like certain characters' backgrounds and certain events that happen. And so if you're not aware, again, spoilers for a very old visual novel at this point, but Sakura and Rin are twin sisters who were separated. Sakura, who is this character here, was adopted by the Mato family in order to retain their magical presence, their magical arts. I don't know. Whereas Rin stayed with her family because they have their own version of magical arts. And so they are aware that they're sisters, but they don't treat each other like sisters anymore because obviously they live in different families. But when Sakura was adopted, she was abused, both like mentally, physically, sexually, all of these things. It was not a good time for her, and it's kind of mentally broken her in order to utilize this weird, creepy magic that the Matos have. And now she's basically, well, I haven't seen the third film, but if the second film is anything to go by, she is not, it's not a good time. She's not doing too well. And ultimately it'll be up to Emiya to save the day and do the Holy Grail stuff and whatever. I don't know. But yeah, so bought this basically to get free shipping on something else, but I was going to buy it at some point anyway. Probably not new like I did now, but yeah, it's good. I remember nothing about it, so I probably will have to rewatch it at some point once the third film. I might watch the first two in order to watch the third before the third film, so I actually remember what the hell's going on. I do remember a lot more from the second film because one, I saw more recently, but two, it had a very memorable ending, so you'd be hard pressed to not remember that, I think. Anyway, yeah, Heaven's Feel. Continuing on with movies, this is another standard Australian release. This is another film that I kind of hated, and when I first watched it, I haven't seen it since. It's the only one of this type of film that I hadn't owned previously, and so I decided to just finally bite the bullet and get it. I was able to get it very cheaply on eBay secondhand. And I wanted to rewatch it, not only because I think it's been a long time since I first watched it, and if my experience is anything to go by, I have, like, sometimes my tastes do change, or my opinions on titles have changed since I was a 17-year-old. And I don't necessarily think that my overall opinion of the characters will change, but I think, my overall understanding of the film or appreciation for the film may change with this. So this is Ocean Waves by Tomomi Mochizuki, but you can see it's a Studio Ghibli film as part of the Studio Ghibli collection. This is an interesting film because although it's under the Studio Ghibli banner, and it is a Ghibli film, it was the first and ultimately only film as part of this program. I guess they wanted to make TV films versus like cinematic films, and this was the first attempt at that. It didn't do too well. It had very mixed reviews even at the time, and ultimately kind of just nipped that whole project in the bud. It kind of ended it there. But this is a story of high school kids from a very small town by the sea, and this girl moves to their town and she's from Tokyo, and our main character kind of falls in love with her, and then she gets him to help her go back to Tokyo to kind of address her personal issues with her family. So basically what's happened, her parents have split up and they're getting a divorce. I think her dad's remarrying, and so she's wanting to see her dad and kind of try and convince him not to get remarried. But we don't know that immediately. So I personally, as a 17-year-old, I really disliked the female character a lot because she is very manipulative. She takes advantage of the feelings that this guy has for her in order to, do what she wants to do. She knows that he'll help her because he likes her, basically. which is a shitty thing to do. But ultimately, she's a dumb 17-year-old who's trying to work through her own family issues. So now, I still think it's a shitty thing to do, but I do think that there's more understanding there as to dumb teenagers being dumb. I also read a really interesting breakdown of this film recently, or a review of this film recently, which I'd like to watch with that perception of these characters, and because really the film is about, because I think it's set 10 years later when they are 27, and they're going back to their hometown, or he's going back to his school reunion, and hoping to see her, or, you know, whatever. And I think that aspect, I think, will be more interesting to me, because spoilers for this film, which is as old as I am, which is 27 years old now, this isn't like a romance. This doesn't end up with them, you know, reconnecting and falling in love, and him, you know, rekindling, like her realizing she always loved him and all that. It's not about that. It's more a reflection on the people, them being the dumb teens that they were when they were dumb teens, and the hindsight of being 10 years older and, you know, laughing at your own stupid choices. And I think I can appreciate that now more. I still don't think it'll be like my favorite movie. I probably still won't even necessarily like it very much, but I will be able to understand it more, I think. Plus, as I said, it's the last of these Ghibli films that I need to finish my Ghibli collection, at least for what they've released so far. So yeah, it was very, very inexpensive, and it just kind of encouraged me to pick it up whilst I still had the chance. Finally, for movies, this is actually what I was wanting to buy, and so that's why I bought the Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel movie, to get free shipping on this. But this movie, okay, so if you're not familiar, anyway, so this is the Sailor Moon Super S movie. It's only like an hour long, so really it's a special or whatever. But this is obviously the Australian release of this film, special, whatever you want to call it. But here in Australia, we have our own release of classic Sailor Moon. I've shown it off whenever I pick it up. And so we have up to season 5 part 1, which was the limited edition. And so that and this film were the most recent Sailor Moon releases here in Australia. And we haven't seen part 2 because there's some issues on I don't know whether it's the Japanese licensing side or what, but we do not have the last handful of episodes, last 20 episodes or so, in English in Australia here yet, which sucks. They have, the people at Madman have been very responsive. They are still working on it. They still plan to release it, but it's been such a long delay. It keeps getting pushed back, and then it was completely removed from the schedule at one point. So obviously fans are nervous. They don't want to miss out on owning classic Sailor Moon. But so in following all of this film is really hard to get. I couldn't find it anywhere aside from one online store, which is why I decided to jump on it, because I didn't want it to go, I guess, out of print due to like licensing issues and not have it, and then maybe have to get the US release. Not that the US release is bad, but it's just not, it wouldn't be consistent with everything else that I own for classic Sailor Moon. So I was like, nope, not gonna risk that. So I bought this. And I haven't watched it yet because I'm not up to this part of Sailor Moon yet. But yeah, I've talked about my relationship with classic Sailor Moon previously. It did air when I was a child, but I never really had the opportunity to watch it outside of, catching bits here and there on television, because I said this before, I wasn't allowed to watch TV before school, the before school cartoons or anything like that, which is tended to be when anime was aired in Australia. We had stuff like Pokemon, Sailor Moon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Digimon, stuff, the fairly standard, typical anime of the time, Dragon Ball as well, or Dragon Ball Z more specifically. But I was never allowed to watch it. So, because if I was watching TV, I wasn't getting ready for school, basically. So I never really watched classic Sailor Moon, aside from, as I said, bits here and there, whilst I was maybe eating breakfast. I was more aware of Pokemon because here in Australia it was a before and after school cartoon, compared to a lot of the others, which were just before school. That our after school cartoons tended to be more like not anime shows, still cartoons but not anime shows. Anyway, so it's been a more recent thing for me to be watching Sailor Moon, and I appreciate it a lot for what it does. It is, it's obviously a more like a Saturday morning TV adaptation of the manga, and it's for young kids. I don't have the nostalgia that most anime fans do have for classic, Usagi and classic Sailor Moon. But I have since read the manga. I do enjoy it for what it is. It's a solid little magical girl show. And it's, the first season, the first season's the only one that I've watched in its entirety so far. But it's a good time. It's nice. I would say it's kind of like Ranma for me. It's kind of background. You watch it, but then you're also doing something else. You don't have to commit 100% of your brain power to a majority of the episodes, because it's just gonna be fighting a monster half the time. This whichever monster of the week that Queen Beryl or whoever decides to send to Earth. Anyways, yeah, Sailor Moon Super S, the movie. I don't know anything about this film because I haven't watched it. So yeah. So on to the TV shows, the TV anime. First being me just picking up, it's not the most recent because I do think that another part, it's up for pre-order at least, but this is My Hero Academia Season 3 Part 2, obviously the second half of Season 3. Season 4 Part 1 is up for pre-orders, I believe. So, we get these like everywhere else. It's just, these are interesting because here in Australia, at least, the first season was released by Sony, but they basically duplicated the US release, limited edition release. Since then, Funimation have become like direct distributors here in Australia. So these are more in line with the US releases. It's a Blu-ray DVD combo, as you can see here, which is really super rare in Australia. We do not get Blu-ray DVD combos, especially for TV shows. You might really, even movies we don't get like both discs. You either buy a DVD set release or a Blu-ray release. You don't. It's just not done. It's not done. So it is very unusual, and kind of an indicator that this was released by Funimation versus Madman or anywhere else. And you can see that here. It's got Funimation on the spine. So yeah, I mean, there's what to say about My Hero Academia. It's a fun Shonen Jump title about a boy who wants superpowers and gets superpowers and is now trying to, well, he now attends superhero school with all of his classmates, and things, you know, there's villains and they have to fight the League of Villains, and you know, life isn't all peachy just because you got some superpowers. It's a fun show. It's a good time. I enjoy all, if not, or most, if not all, the characters. You know, for people like to be very dismissive of whatever the new popular title is for quote unquote normies or people just coming into the fandom. But legitimately, My Hero Academia is a really good time. I think there's a lot of really interesting and exciting and fun ideas surrounding it. And like, really, I think you can be critical of anything, but I don't understand people who are critical of series for being exactly what they're supposed to be, you know? Like, oh, well, you know, oh, it's a kid's show, or like it's dumb, it's for, like, it's got dumb ideas. Like, yeah, it was written for 12-year-olds. I'm sorry you're a 37-year-old and haven't felt joy in your life for the last 30 years, but, you know, it's not meant to be groundbreaking, you know, art that revolutionizes the world. There's a lot of anime out there that do attempt to be that. That's not what My Hero Academia is meant to be. It's meant to be a fun superhero action adventure story featuring a pretty likable cast. I would say that it's kind of on the same level as any sort of Marvel blockbuster where it's a likable cast. Sure, the story is dumb, but you care about the characters and you care about what's going on. So, you know, it doesn't really matter, right? I'm not completely up to date with the manga. I'm probably like 50 chapters, or not 50. I'm probably like 30 chapters behind at this point. But I do enjoy the manga. I'm not actively collecting it. I actually don't own any of it anymore. But I do enjoy it. It's one of the most popular and a lot of people's favorite in Jump right now, along with Haikyuu and obviously the recently ended Demon Slayer and Promised Neverland. Yeah, I think there's a lot more story that can be told in My Hero Academia. There's a lot of potential for it, and as I said, the characters are ultimately all really likable. Also, I don't own it because it hasn't been released yet, but the newest film, for 97% of that movie I really loved. Like, I legitimately thought it was so good, and the ending was really dumb. The ending was dumb and was like, oh, that's stupid. But I really liked all the rest of it, and it's because all of the characters, all of Class A at least, were able to show off their powers, and they work together, and you see that a lot more in this series as you go through. It's not just like a Deku and Bakugo and Todoroki focused, or even Ida focused story. You have a lot more interaction with the other classmates, and I think that's really, really wonderful. Anyway, yeah, season 3. Good season. I don't really remember what happens in it. But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot, and I like having these, I think for longer shonen, especially these action adventure stuff, and especially with the adaptation by Bones that is done so well, like with this show, I kind of prefer having the show versus the comics. I'm sure at some point I may own the comic again if they put out a box set, which I'm sure they will in 10 years' time. But, you know, it's a good time, and I don't really need to convince people otherwise, because most people know whether they like or dislike My Hero Academia at this point. Next is another show that I've owned in like a couple different iterations. Basically, I used to own the US release of this show, and then I sold it many a year ago, with the expectation that I was going to buy the Australian release, and then I just never got around to it. But this is the complete collection for Eden of the East. So it has both the show and the 2 sequel films. So if you're not aware, well, actually it has the the recap film in there as well. But this was an Noitamina show, kind of near future sci-fi drama romance about a girl who, while she's on vacation, she runs into this guy who is outside of the White House, naked, holding a gun, and she's like, what the hell is going on? And then he kind of drags her into a cab, and they spend the day together, and yeah, so that's how the show starts. Basically, there's this, I guess, game going on where this secretive billionaire has given various people within Japan a bunch of money and the ability to do whatever they want to do in order to create positive social change. And whoever is able to do that most effectively, like, gets even, I can't remember, but they get rewarded somehow. And so it's kind of like a battle royale almost, but with social change. So there's other people, you know, trying to do good, or at least influence society in a way that they think will help society and make the world a better place. And we have our main character who's doing that kind of by becoming a domestic terrorist, but in a similar way of domestic terrorism as the characters from Terror and Resonance. It's an interesting little thing. He has a group of people around him who are also kind of swept up in what he's doing. It's a fun time. It's been a long time since I've watched this show. I initially watched it when it was airing, which was, that was like 2010, something like that. And this is one of the earlier Noitamina shows. It was kind of at midpoint. I don't know, does Noitamina technically still exist? I guess so. The Psychopaths and stuff are still Noitamina shows. So yeah, it still exists. But for a while there was no Noitamina shows, which was sad because, as I've said, like with Manglobe, Noitamina, and actually, no, it was 22 episodes. Samurai Flamenco was a Noitamina show. But if you're not familiar, Noitamina is and was a program block where more unusual, less popular, less like otaku bait styles of series were being made. And a lot of my favorite shows come from that block of programming. Things like Honey and Clover, things like Princess Jellyfish, Samurai Flamenco, as I just mentioned, this show, and also like some weird ones, Sea Control or Money and Control, Fractale, the Guilty Crowns. You know, it's a very hit and miss style of thing, and I think that's just kind of part and parcel when it comes to being making things usually original anime as well, not based off of anything, which this is an original idea, original script. Psychopaths was also part of the Noitamina block, but there was a time when a lot of the Noitamina shows just didn't feel like what they were supposed to. They did just feel like they were trying to cash in and become very popular with otaku and stuff, like Guilty Crown, like Psychopaths, I would argue. Whereas now, more recently, it's kind of gone back to its roots, which is good. But Eden of the East was one of those. I enjoyed it a lot. It's weird, but it's a fun time. It's a crazy ride. I think the characters, again, are very likable here. And as I said, I've been meaning to pick this up forever because it's one case, all 4 discs, and it saves on shelf space. And I am hoping to rewatch this somewhat soonish. So yeah, Eden of the East, check it out. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere. Probably Funimation has its streaming, because this is a Funimation series in the US. It would be streaming on Anime Lab, probably here in Australia. Elsewhere, I do not know. But yeah, check it out if you haven't. It's a pretty fun time. It's if you like kind of sci-fi stuff in the vein of, I don't know, like robotics notes maybe even, then check it out. Next is another local release, Australian release, that's kind of a downgrade from a previous release I owned. So this is the 3-disc complete collection of Skip Beat, the complete series. This was put out by Hanabi here in Australia. And this is obviously the Blu-ray release of this fun comedy shoujo series about a girl who is, because of spite, is becoming a talento, becoming a, you know, an idol, I guess. Not really an idol, an actress, kind of television talent, in order to spite her ex-boyfriend, who is a musician and very popular, and who said that she was too boring and she could never do it. She's like, well, screw you, I'm gonna do it. Just to prove him wrong. I love this series. I love the manga. It's ongoing and very, very long at 43 volumes, 44 volumes. But I love Kyoko. I think she's a fantastic main character. I actually really like her relationship with all of the people around her, including her romantic interest, who is on the cover here, although he is a little too old for her at this point. I also really like the kind of, in the manga at least, the relationship she has with her ex-boyfriend, Sho. He's, for as much of an idiot, bastard, you know, dumb jerk, he's also a 16-year-old boy with an inflated ego and very, like, he gets better. He gets better. Plus, also in the Japanese, he's voiced by Miyano Mamoru, which ultimately makes you know that he's not really a villain. So, yeah, I'm just an Mamoru Miyano apologist. But anyway, so if you're not familiar, this series was initially crowdfunded, not the show itself, but the US disc release of it was initially crowdfunded by Pied Piper, who is also the company that released the Time of Eve film. And I was part of that Kickstarter. It was for a Region A Blu-ray release. And part of the campaign, because initially they tried it on Indiegogo, which didn't do very well because a lot of people weren't very comfortable with Indiegogo. This is during the craze when crowdfunding anime releases was a lot more popular. It's kind of fallen off, especially because Funimation did it with Escaflowne. But Pied Piper were really kind of the ones that proved the method with Time of Eve. They did a great job with that. But the production company in Japan wanted a dub for this. No, they weren't going to allow a US release of the show without an English dub, which is what I think held it up from being licensed for so long. And it's a really fun series. It is also one of those series that has a non-ending because, as I said, it's an ongoing manga, and the anime is just like, yeah, okay, well, that's the end. It doesn't have any follow-up season 2 or anything, so, you know, yeah, those are kind of issues against it. But Pied Piper wanted to release it, so they were crowdfunding the dub. Initially, it was going to be a DVD-only series because they weren't sure that people would pledge for a dub Kickstarter, because obviously there's a huge division between dub and sub fans. Which is this, like, guys, it's such a stupid argument. Anyway, not to get into that, but, ultimately they did reach their Kickstarter goal. They also exceeded it enough to get a Blu-ray release, and it was all very exciting. It had a really lovely limited edition that kind of looked like teen, magazines, and it had all of these little extras and all of that. I owned it for many a year. As I said, I was one of the backers on Kickstarter. If you actually have one of the Kickstarter editions, my name is on that list. You don't know what it is, but it's on there. So yeah, I was a very active part of the Kickstarter. I followed it and was kind of at the edge of my seat to make sure, because the Blu-ray was kind of one of the last things to be reached, and it was kind of, on the edge of your seat to find out if we would ultimately get the Blu-ray discs. But after the crowdfunding and after the all of that being fulfilled and the US release being done, Hanabi licensed it for Australia, and we got this release. And yeah, I mean, I decided to pick this one up because as much as I loved being a part of the Kickstarter, as much as it's a really fun, clever release, with the limited edition, just how the chipboard looks and all of that, it's a show that I'm fine with having the standard edition, right? And it was so cheap versus the actual Kickstarter release. I didn't mind parting with the limited edition just to pick this one up. Yeah, so Skip Beat, check it out. This is another one that's streaming on Crunchyroll. I don't know if the dub's on there, but I'm pretty sure if you're in the US, you can still buy perhaps a more standard Blu-ray release or DVD release of the show on Right Stuff. I don't know. I'm pretty sure they've had a follow-up. I don't know. Or the not it's a release but without the Kickstarter like limited edition extras and all of that. But if you haven't watched the show and you're wanting something funny, check it out on Crunchyroll. It's a good time. Finally, we have another standard release of a show that I've been meaning to pick up for literally years, and just never got around to it. And that is Cowboy Bebop parts 1 and 2, and then also the movie. I was able to get all of these from an eBay seller for like half the price that they normally would have gone. So Cowboy Bebop's a classic. It doesn't really need any introduction. I think most people have seen it, or at least are very well aware of it. This is a sci-fi, kind of space opera style noir mystery show. It's a mix, but it's a classic. Obviously, most people know it. It's the quintessential like anime you can show your friends who aren't into anime, and follows a group of space people. It's been a while since I've seen Bebop, but a group of people in space that do kind of odd jobs on board the spaceship Bebop, and their lives and them confronting their pasts in various ways. It's a very episodic show, but very, 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 very good. The film is an interesting one. It's set in Halloween, so maybe a good one to pop in for Halloween. But I previously owned the Australian DVD release of this, that was just the fat pack for the 6 remixed discs, whatever they were called, I don't remember. And then later I did own the Amazon exclusive US Blu-ray, which has a box and comes with like 2 different booklets and all these sorts of things, which again I have sold since with the intention to buy these releases. But when I sold that was like 5 years ago. And I just never got around to picking up either the UK or the Australian releases, mainly because they're very pricey for what they are. Obviously Bebop is very popular, but it never, like, I never find it on sale anywhere, right? It's just one that's always like a set price, and I'm not always, like, I'm not willing to spend $60 per 12 episodes. It's just not what I'm here for, so yeah, decided to wait. And luckily I was able to find someone who was selling it for a lot cheaper than that. But yeah, I mean, I think these are based off of the UK discs, which are somewhat better than the US releases, but it's not as good. I don't know. There's people who are much more aware of like video quality and stuff like that for all of the different releases. I think this is one that is slightly better than the US release, but not like brilliant. But most people don't really care about that. Anyways, nice to finally have this back in the collection. As I said, it's been a long time since I've had the series to watch, and I do plan on rewatching it somewhat soonish because my sister's never seen it, and now she's finished with uni, so she can actually sit down and watch some stuff now that she's still technically stuck inside because of coronavirus, but also she doesn't have to be at her desk 24 hours of the day doing assignments. And it's about time I rewatch this, because as I said, it's been at least 5 years since I've owned the show. It's probably been 10 years since I've watched the show. So yeah, Cowboy Bebop, pretty great classic sci-fi. So that's everything that I got for this month. A huge amount more than I ever expected, mainly due in part because, as I said, there was a lot of things that I'd ordered in months prior that got held up with shipping because obviously global pandemic right now. But ultimately there's quite a few things that I got secondhand here as well that I had just found really good deals on, and decided to jump on them whilst they were still very good deals. But yeah, also kind of different from usual insofar as all of them are Region B releases, majority of them being Australian releases. I don't buy Australian releases all that often. I mean, I own plenty of them, plenty of Australian releases, but more often than not when it comes to at least anime, like TV shows, I do tend to buy the US edition, either because it's the only release that's ever been given to a show, or I prefer their limited editions for like Funimation style stuff. But yeah, kind of an oddity. Plus also got my free merchandise as per usual for this time of, well, every month basically. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on any of these titles, whether you've seen them, whether you agree with me on my opinions on some of these, or if you completely disagree. I'd like to hear it all. As always, links in my description for my Twitter, most notably, so I'm on there very often. You can talk to me there, follow me there if you so wish. I also have my Book Depository affiliate link in there, which is great if you are wanting to buy manga worldwide, because that's where I go for the most part, and it's free worldwide shipping, and yeah, generally really good customer service and all that other good stuff, and really good prices too. Not so much if you're in the US, because you guys have Amazon and a whole bunch of other bookstores and chains and things that us folk outside of the continental United States do not have access to. So if you're like that, if you're like me, then check it out. But yeah, otherwise, thank you guys so much for watching. I am Simply G, and as always, I'll catch you in the next video. Bye till then.